3,000 babies. Not one mother lost. Not a single one. Most people alive today were born in a hospital room under fluorescent lights, surrounded by machines that beep and monitors that glow. They came into this world guided by gloved hands trained in sterile corridors. That is the only world most of us know. But there was another world, not so long ago, where a different kind of woman walked through the dark before dawn, carrying a leather bag worn soft at the handles. And she did something the modern world has nearly forgotten how to do. This is the particular tragedy of the last practitioner. It is not just that a skill is lost. It is that you can see the moment it is lost, the moment the thread is cut, the moment the chain of hands that stretches back generations reaches its final link, and no one is there to take hold of the next one. Rahima Bibi is that final link. She knows it. She has known it for a long time. There is a room in her house where she keeps the bag. It is the same leather bag, or as close to it as possible. The original fell apart years ago. But the woman who made leather goods in her village, now also very old, made her a replacement that matches the original in every dimension, every compartment, every strap. Rahima packed it herself with the same things her mother used to pack. The dried herbs wrapped in cloth, the small curved instrument her grandmother's grandmother had made from horn, the length of cord, the cloth that had been boiled and folded. She repacks it every few months. She does not need to. She has not been called to a birth in several years. But she repacks it anyway, and she sits with it sometimes, and if you asked her why, she would take a long time to answer. She would probably say something about keeping faith. She was called for the last time 3 years ago. A young woman in a village 2 hours' walk from hers. In the middle of winter, labor started too fast. No car could get through the snow. No one could reach the hospital in time. They sent a boy running through the dark to find Rahima Bibi. He was 12 years old and his hands were shaking when he knocked on her door. She was in her 80s. She got dressed, picked up the bag, and walked 2 hours through the snow. She will describe this without drama, as if it is the most ordinary thing. The snow, the dark, the cold that got into her joints. The boy walking ahead of her with a lamp. The way the village looked when they arrived, every window lit. Every woman in the household awake and afraid. The sound of the laboring woman. The particular quality of that sound, which told Rahima everything she needed to know before she even entered the room. She put her bag down. She washed her hands in the water they had prepared. She looked at the young woman, who was frightened and exhausted and barely out of girlhood herself. Rahima sat beside her and took her hand and spoke to her quietly for several minutes before she did anything else. No one remembers exactly what she said. The young woman remembers the sound of her voice. She says it was like being told that everything was already going to be fine, that the outcome had already been decided, that all she needed to do was trust her body and be present in the room. The fear did not leave all at once, but it changed. It became something she could work with. 4 hours later, a healthy child was born. The mother did not lose more blood than was normal. She did not tear in the way that causes lasting damage. She recovered quickly. She is alive and well today. And her child is 3 years old and does not know that his birth was attended by the last practitioner of a tradition that stretches back further than anyone can count. Rahima Bibi walked home at dawn. She does not talk about that night the way people talk about triumphs. She talks about it the way she talks about all the births she attended, with a kind of careful reverence, as if she is describing something sacred that happened to involve her rather than something she accomplished. This is consistent. It is how she has always described her work, not as her doing, as the work being done, and her being present for it. She is very old now. The specific number is not certain, even to her. She thinks she is 87. She might be older. She is small and moves carefully, the way people move when their joints have earned their right to complain. Her hands, the ones that have caught 3,000 lives, are gnarled with age. When she holds them out and looks at them, her expression is something that takes a long time to read. Not sadness exactly, not pride, something that sits between memory and gratitude. She knows what will happen when she goes. The bag will sit in that room. The herbs inside it will lose their potency. The cord will fray. The cloth will yellow. The curved instrument made from horn, the one that was her grandmother's grandmother's, will lie in its compartment, and there will be no one left who knows what it is for, or how to hold it, or what it meant to the woman who made it. The knowledge that was never written down, because it could not be written down, because it lived in the hands and the memory and the quality of attention, will cease to exist in the world. This is not a small thing. We talk about cultural loss in the abstract in the language of anthropology and heritage preservation, and the abstraction can make it feel distant. But cultural loss is also this: a leather bag, an old woman sitting beside it, the last person who knows what everything inside it means. There are researchers now who want to document what she knows. Not to recreate the practice, they say, though some of them say it with less certainty than others, but to preserve it, to record it, to give it a place in the archive before the archive closes. Rahima Bibi receives them politely. She answers some of their questions. But she has said to the people she trusts that she is not sure what it means to put her knowledge into words. She is not sure the words will carry what the knowledge is. She is not sure a description of her hands is the same as her hands. She is probably right. She spends her mornings now sitting at the window that faces east, in the direction where the mountains catch the first light. The village is quieter than it used to be. Many of the young people have left. The sounds she grew up with, the sounds of a village fully inhabited and working, are thinner now, like a song with half the voices missing. She watches the light come up and she drinks her tea, and sometimes the women who live nearby come to sit with her. Not for anything in particular, just to be near her the way people want to be near something they can sense is passing. She does not seem to be afraid of what is coming. She says she has sat at the threshold too many times to fear it. She says the threshold is just a door, and doors open in both directions. She says this and then she smiles. And the smile is the kind that takes a long time to understand, full of something earned through 60 years of walking through the dark toward the sound of a woman in pain, carrying a bag worn soft at the handles, and never once losing faith in what she was walking toward. 3,000 lives. Not one mother lost. And when she goes, the number will be complete, the chain will be closed. And the world will be smaller in a way that most of it will never notice, and the leather bag will sit in its room, and the herbs will dry to dust, and the knowledge will not be anywhere in the world except in the 3,000 lives that exist because an old woman in the mountains kept faith with her hands for 80 years and did not let the threshold close while she was standing guard. Her name was Rahima Bibi. She was born in a village pressed between two mountains in the northwest, where the rivers run cold even in summer and the roads, when there were roads at all, turned to mud in the rains. She could not tell you exactly what year she was born. Calendars were not the way her people measured time. She measured time in births, in the children who came before and the children who came after. In the seasons she had walked through the night to reach a woman crying out in the dark. She delivered her first baby alone at the age of 14. That is not a typo. 14 years old. A girl herself, barely. Her own mother had been a midwife, and her mother's mother before that. And somewhere back along that unbroken chain of women, the knowledge had passed from hands to hands like something too precious to write down, because writing it down would mean trusting paper over memory, and paper could burn. The old method, That phrase deserves to sit with you for a moment before we go further, because it is easy to hear those words and picture something primitive, something superstitious, something to be dismissed. But here is what you need to understand. The women who practiced the old method studied for years before they ever touched a laboring mother. They learned by watching. They learned by listening. They learned the position of a child inside the womb by the shape of a woman's belly, by the firmness of a kick, by the way a woman breathed when she lay still. They memorized the sounds of a birth going well and a birth going wrong. They knew the herbs that slowed bleeding and the pressure that could turn a child presenting sideways. They knew things that have no name in any textbook because no one ever thought to write them down. And Rahima Bibi knew all of it. By the time she was 30, women in 4 neighboring villages would send for no one else. By the time she was 50, she had become something between a healer and a legend. By the time she was 70, she was the last one left. There is a word in her language for what she was. It translates imperfectly. Something close to the keeper of thresholds, the one who stands at the door between not yet born and born, between alive and not alive, and holds it open with her own hands. She held it open for 3,000 lives. We need to talk about what that number really means. 3,000 is not an abstraction. 3,000 is a schoolyard full of children who laugh and argue and grow. 3,000 is a village, and then another village, and then another after that. 3,000 is grandmothers alive today who do not know they owe their existence to a woman who will die without a Wikipedia page or a photograph in any official archive. 3,000 births, and in all of them, in all those years, through all those nights, through all the difficult ones and the terrifying ones, and the ones where she must have known she was holding a life in her bare hands, not a single mother died. Not one. Let that land. The statistics we accept as normal today would horrify her. Maternal mortality rates in modern hospitals, even in wealthy countries, remain a subject of public health concern. Women die in childbirth in well-funded facilities attended by trained professionals with every modern tool available. Rahima Bibi, working in cold rooms lit by oil lamps, attending to women malnourished and exhausted from hard physical labor, traveling on foot through mountain passes in the middle of winter, never once lost a mother. She had an explanation for this, though she gave it reluctantly and only to people she trusted. She said that a woman's body knows how to do this. She said that the midwife's job is not to take over from the body, but to listen to it, to help it do what it already knows. She said that most of the things that go wrong in birth go wrong because someone is afraid. Either the mother is afraid or the people around her are afraid, and fear tightens what needs to open. She would say this quietly, looking at her hands, as if she were reading something written on her palms that no one else could see. She began her training the way all the women in her lineage had. Her mother woke her before dawn on a morning in early spring, the year she turned 8, and told her to get dressed and come. There was a woman in the village who was close to her time, not laboring yet, just close. Rahima's mother wanted her to sit in the corner and be still and watch, just watch. Not speak, not ask questions, not react to anything she saw or heard, just watch. She sat in that corner for 6 hours. She watched everything. She watched the way her mother moved around the room, never rushing, never startling the laboring woman with a sudden gesture. She watched her mother's hands, how they pressed and measured and soothed. She watched the other women in the room, the aunts and neighbors who held the laboring woman's hands and spoke close to her ear. She watched the way the atmosphere in the room shifted from fear to focus to something that can only be described as collective will. Every woman in that room wanting the same thing with the same intensity at the same moment. She did not fully understand what she was watching. She was 8 years old, but she never forgot it. For the next 6 years, she went with her mother to every birth she was called to. She never spoke unless spoken to. She carried the bag, she boiled the water. She learned which herbs were kept in which compartment of the bag and what each one was for. She learned by asking her mother afterward, on the walk home in the pale early morning, when the questions were allowed. Her mother would answer in full, expecting her to remember everything without writing anything down. This was not cruelty. This was how it had always been done. The knowledge lived in the body. The knowledge lived in the hands. There is something worth pausing on here. Something that feels almost unbearably sad when you look at it straight. All of that accumulated knowledge, all of that generational wisdom, all of those thousands of walks home in the early morning where a mother answered her daughter's questions and trusted her to hold the answers forever, it all died with the women who carried it. One by one, as the old midwives aged and passed away, the knowledge went with them. The daughters did not always follow. The world changed. Hospitals came, or the promise of hospitals. The women who might have been trained to carry on were told that the old way was backward, dangerous, unscientific. Some of it was. Let us be honest about that. Some of what was practiced in the name of tradition did cause harm, and the move towards skilled clinical care has saved countless lives. No one is arguing that. But somewhere in the transition, something else was lost. Something that has no name in any curriculum. Something that Rahima Bibi carried in her hands and her memory and the specific weight of her attention when she sat with a laboring woman in a dark room and listened to what the body was trying to say. She trained 3 apprentices over her lifetime. She will tell you this with a grief she does not quite hide. 3 in 60 years of practice. The first was her daughter, who died of a fever when she was 22, the year after she delivered her first baby on her own. The second was a young woman from a neighboring village who learned for 4 years and then married a man who moved her far away to a city where she never practiced again. The third was a girl who learned for 2 years and then told Rahima she wanted to go to school to become a proper nurse, and Rahima had held the girl's face in both hands and told her to go and learn everything they would teach her. Rahima said this without bitterness, and everyone who heard her say it believed her. But the knowledge still died with her